The air hung heavy with cigarette smoke and secrets. It was the kind of night that swallowed sound and hid intentions. The kind of night where love stories began and ended in the alleyways. Brad first saw Sarah in this world of shadows, her laughter a beacon in the dim-lit bar they called the Blue Angel. He was a nobody, a guy trying to make an honest living, and she was different. She had dreams bigger than the neon signs that flickered outside. They were an unlikely pair, thrown together by fate or maybe just a shared taste for cheap whiskey and soulful jazz. Their love story unfolded slowly, whispered promises exchanged in the dead of night, stolen kisses under the watchful gaze of the moon. He saw a raw honesty in her eyes, a flicker of vulnerability that mirrored his own. She, in turn, was drawn to his quiet strength, his unwavering loyalty in a world that thrived on betrayal. But even in the darkness, shadows have a way of shifting, revealing truths better left unseen. Theirs was a love born in the shadows. But shadows, as Brad would soon learn, can both conceal and betray. He clung to the hope that their love was enough, a fragile flame in the encroaching darkness. But some fires, even the brightest ones, are destined to be extinguished by the chilling winds of ambition. Brad was a simple man, a man of routine and quiet devotion. He worked in the shipyard, the smell of salt and steel clinging to his clothes like a second skin. His days were long, his hands calloused, but his heart was full of Sarah. He saw the world in shades of gray, but she was his splash of color, his reason to believe in something more. Every spare moment was spent with her, sharing stories in hushed tones, finding solace in each other's company. He would bring her wildflowers he found on his way home, their delicate beauty a stark contrast to the harsh realities of their lives. He never pretended to be someone he wasn't, his love for her as honest as the day was long. Brad was content with their small world, a world illuminated by their shared dreams and the quiet symphony of their love. He believed in the sanctity of promises, in the enduring power of a love that defied logic and reason. But he was a man standing on the edge of a precipice, unaware of the chasm that ambition was about to tear open between them. Sarah was an enigma, a whirlwind of contradictions wrapped in a silk dress and a string of pearls. She was born with a restless spirit, a burning desire for something more than the hand life had dealt her. She dreamed of escaping the suffocating grip of their neighborhood, of a world where champagne flowed freely and troubles drowned in crystal glasses. She wasn't heartless, not exactly. Sarah loved Brad in her own way. She appreciated his stability, the way he made her feel safe in a world that often felt like it was spinning too fast. But his love was a steady anchor, and she longed to set sail, to chase the glittering lights that beckoned from across the harbor. Sarah craved the finer things, the intoxicating allure of wealth and status. She yearned for a life where her name was whispered in gilded halls, where she could trade in cheap whiskey for vintage champagne. Her ambition was a double-edged sword, both exhilarating and terrifying, pushing her toward a future where love might not be enough. The cracks started subtly, hairline fractures in the foundation of their love. It began with a chance encounter, a whispered conversation at the Blue Angel that lingered in the smoke-filled air long after the words had faded. He was older, more established, a businessman with eyes that promised a life beyond the drudgery of the shipyard. At first, Sarah tried to ignore the allure, the seductive whispers of a world she'd only ever dreamed of. But the more time she spent with him, the more Brad's world seemed to shrink, the colors fading into a dull monochrome. The businessman represented everything she thought she wanted: security, status, and a way out of the life that threatened to trap her. The guilt gnawed at her, a constant reminder of Brad's unwavering love. But the lure of a different life, a life free from financial worries and social constraints, proved too strong to resist. Sarah found herself torn between the comfort of familiarity and the intoxicating allure of the unknown. She was a moth drawn to a flame, oblivious to the potential for self-destruction. Section 5. A chasm of ambition. The more Sarah pursued her ambitions, the wider the chasm between her and Brad grew. His world, once a shared haven, began to feel small, suffocating. She found herself constantly comparing, contrasting the rough edges of his world with the polished veneer of the life she craved. He noticed, of course. How could he not? The late nights, the hushed phone calls, the way her eyes seemed to glaze over when he spoke of their future together. He tried to ignore the signs, to cling to the belief that their love was strong enough to withstand the storm brewing on the horizon. He bought her a new dress, a shimmering emerald green that reminded him of her eyes. He thought maybe if he could just remind her of the love they shared, of the life they were building together, she would come back to him. But the gesture, once met with unbridled joy, now elicited a sad smile, a look of guilt that cut him deeper than any blade. Section 6. Whispers of doubt, echoes of fear. Doubt crept into Brad's heart like a persistent chill, whispering insidious doubts in his ear. He saw the way she looked at the businessman, the admiration, the longing reflected in her eyes. He felt the distance growing between them, a vast expanse that his love alone couldn't bridge. He tried to talk to her, to understand the shift in her demeanor, the growing unease that shadowed her every move. But she would deflect, offering reassurances that rang hollow in the silence that followed. Her touch, once a source of comfort and solace, now felt strained, a mere formality. The fear he had tried so desperately to suppress began to consume him, a monster lurking in the shadows of their love. He knew, deep down, that he couldn't compete with the world she so desperately desired, a world built on wealth and social standing, a world where he would always be an outsider. Section 7. The bitter taste of goodbye. The inevitable arrived on a night shrouded in a thick fog, the air heavy with unspoken words and the weight of broken promises. Sarah sat across from him at their usual booth in the Blue Angel, her eyes red-rimmed, her face pale under the dim lights. She spoke of dreams and aspirations, of a future that no longer included him. Her words were kind, laced with regret and a flicker of guilt, but they cut through him like shards of glass. She tried to explain that it wasn't about love, not entirely, but about wanting more, about grasping for a life that seemed perpetually out of reach. He listened in silence, his heart cracking with each whispered word. The key to their small apartment lay on the table between them, a symbol of the life they'd built together, a life now shattered beyond repair. He wanted to rage, to scream his pain into the night, but all he could manage was a hollow chuckle, the sound echoing the emptiness that had settled in his soul. Section 8. Smoke and mirrors, love and loss. She left him with a final kiss, her tears mingling with the taste of her lipstick, a bittersweet reminder of what they had lost. He watched her walk away, her silhouette disappearing into the fog, swallowed by the city that had promised her everything and taken everything in return. Brad sat there for a long time, the ghost of her perfume lingering in the air, a cruel reminder of the love that had slipped through his fingers like grains of sand. He finally stumbled out into the night, the city lights blurring through his tear-filled eyes. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, the familiar streets suddenly foreign and cold. He had loved her with every fiber of his being, had offered her his heart without reservation, but it hadn't been enough. Love, he realized, was a fickle mistress, easily swayed by ambition and the allure of a life less ordinary. Section 9. Alone in the Noir. The Blue Angel, once a sanctuary, now stood as a stark reminder of his loss. He walked past the familiar corner, the sound of muted trumpets and mournful saxophones spilling out into the night. But there was no comfort to be found in the music tonight, only the bitter aftertaste of heartbreak and the crushing weight of loneliness. Brad disappeared into the labyrinthine streets, swallowed by the shadows that had always defined his world. He was alone, adrift in a sea of neon lights and broken dreams, another casualty in the city's relentless pursuit of ambition and fleeting pleasure. And as the fog rolled in, obscuring the city in its melancholic embrace, one couldn't help but wonder if Sarah, amidst the clinking champagne glasses and hollow laughter of her new life, ever spared a thought for the man she left behind, the man who had loved her truly, madly, deeply, but not enough. Because, in the unforgiving world of film noir, love, like a wisp of smoke, often dissipates into the night. leaving behind only a lingering scent of what could have been.